What if your goals of operating within a special operations military unit ended when a fight ensued in an alcohol-related incident? What if you found later that you had developed a traumatic brain injury at some point and the alcohol combined with an arachnoid cyst that had developed were the root cause of a lot of your aggression? Would you sink into despair, or would you take steps to living a better life and continuing a new mission path that lay ahead of you? What if your military training had conditioned you to brave corners of developing situations within journalism that most refuse to cross because of the danger? Join me as I talk to Joshua Skovlund about his path within the military to where his passion has brought him in the world of journalism. This is Veteran Success Story. Today on Veteran Success Story, I'm joined with Joshua Skovlund, journalist, photographer, veteran of the 75th Ranger Regiment, and just an overall good dude. Chances are, if you've read anything from either Black Rifle Coffee magazine back in the day, or what is it, Coffee or Die, or Task and Purpose, you've probably consumed some of Joshua's content, articles. I mean, he's been involved in everything from his first experience was the riots in Minneapolis, and just, everything ingrained up in and through since then within the military and veteran community. We had a great conversation. I'm not going to get too much into it because you're about to listen to the episode, but I will say that if you enjoyed the episode, tell a friend. And right now hit that follow and subscribe button. I could see that, it's over 95% of the people that are listening to this and consuming the content. You guys aren't subscribed or you're not following. It does a huge bunch on this end. If you could do that, it'll still stay free. My goal is to always have this show as being free because quite honestly, it's meant to inspire people to look forward to something or look into doing something better with themselves. Or finding that next step within the veteran community or next step within their life. And I know that sometimes when that's the case, they don't have access to Patreon they have access to it, but they're not going to consume that content. It's that barrier there. So I'm trying to put this together. It's really something for you guys. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Like it, follow it, tell a friend if you found it useful. But without going any further, let's get right into the conversation here with Joshua Skovlund, and you are listening to Veteran Success Story. Josh, welcome to Veteran Success Story. It's great to have you on, man. I know we were talking a little bit beforehand, and it was really just like we had to start rolling the recording, which, if Denny's listening to this one, you're right. I do need to figure out some way to naturally segue into this. So I hit recording much earlier because I think it's like half an hour now to where we've been talking as well as the prior. But Josh, it's good to finally have you on here, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's good to be on here. I love what you guys have been doing. So it's cool to be on here.
Yeah, it's just talking with other veterans doing stuff within where their passions and stuff lie, because I've sort of found that for myself anyway, listening to the long-term or long-form format stuff like podcasts and everything, it's been able to inspire or push some of the things that I've wanted to do along the way. And I've been able to kind of take little things from there and be like, oh, that clicks with me, or that works with me, or I never thought about that before. So it's cool to have someone on. For the people that don't know or that didn't catch it in the intro, Josh is a journalist, but your path has gone from, was EMT before the Rangers or after you left?
After I was out of the Army. So I started I had a full ride scholarship with Air Force ROTC in South Dakota. And the program I was pursuing at the time got changed and it switched me to needs of the Air Force. So I was like, nope. Decided to go hit up the Army and ended up going to Ranger Regiment. Got myself in trouble while I was there with drinking and fighting. So I'm not the best Ranger in the world by any means. But when I got out of that, one of the things that I wanted to do while I was in the Army was be a medic so I could go to SOCM. There just wasn't slots available at the time. So once I got out, ran my gym for a while. I was a personal trainer, started my own gym. It was a MMA kind of CrossFit blended gym. Got really tired of the clientele aspect of that business and decided I was going to pursue medicine. So I went through civilian EMT, went straight into paramedic school, landed an internship in Minneapolis and worked there for several years, became a critical care paramedic in the outstate region of Minnesota there. And now I'm still a part-time medic for my local fire station out here in New Hampshire.
Man, whoa, that was the Josh Skovlund in a nutshell kind of thing there, like that, just condensed. You press it down.
Yeah.
Well, that's also, I mean, Ranger Regiment, the pacing and stuff. I mean, really, anywhere that was combat arms within the GWAT era, just that pace became something that was just grueling over time for people, and it was just that constant push. So, what do a lot of people do in the military when they're on their off time? Especially, you know, they're going to pick up some beers, they're going to drink, and I've listened to a little bit of your story, at least on the other side, on the appearance that you had on Security Hall, to kind of pull apart. Well, you guys started talking about that you found you had a cyst, I believe it was in like a something was going on to where that drinking was exacerbating aggressive behavior and other things that were going on within there. And it's something to be aware of for other people, because I've seen more times than not, you know, alcohol cause huge issues out there. And it's just like, dude, just put down the sauce, man. Like,
Yep.
if you can't put it down for a little while and just do a 90-day reset, you know, that's with anything, you know, it's marijuana too, you know, it can work to your favor to a point, but then if you start finding yourself leaning heavily on there as your coping mechanism, it becomes something else.
Yeah, I think like drinking in the military needs to be a culture shift, because if you don't make the culture change and move away from that, you're always going to have those problems. You can look back to like the earliest wars of our country and see where drinking was like infused into that lifestyle of serving, and regiment was definitely no exception on that. And I won't go into too much detail on that, but when I was there, there was a hefty amount of alcohol consumption, because you would train really hard and then you would play really hard. It just so happens I was a couple months before my 21st birthday, and if you get into a bar fight downtown and you're underage, like, it's not going to be good.
Oh, this was Georgia too, right?
Yeah, it was in Columbus, Georgia. They had their, I don't know if it's still a thing now, but we were told there's like a task force from the police department that looked specifically for dudes that were active military, and they just were trying to keep things calm down there. But
Yeah.
I just happened to get myself into a whole heap of mess, trouble, really.
Oh,
And I'm not a doctor or anything. I've been trying to figure out, like, why is it that I, like, if I have a couple beers as an example, no
Mhm.
problems. But if I get to that like intoxicated level, not even blackout drunk, but just a buzz, that's when my decision making just goes out the window. And a lot of people can have that without having a cyst. I've just been going down the rabbit hole after they found there's a big old cyst in the back of my brain in the center that's by the base of my brain there. And I was like, I wonder if that affects anything. And so as I've been reading the white papers that are available on arachnoid cysts, because there's a very traditional mindset in healthcare that they're congenital, they're asymptomatic, they don't do anything. But as I've learned working in healthcare for as long as I have, a lot of these things that they thought didn't do anything actually is something, and it does affect stuff. And I found a few case studies on people with arachnoid cysts where it talks about how they go into a state of psychosis once they hit a certain level of intoxication with alcohol specifically. I think alcohol is pointless. It's dangerous. Really no need for it. Marijuana, on the other hand, I am an advocate to an extent with that stuff. But like you said, if your life is relying on it, that's when it stops becoming that medicine, that tool that you're using. And it's just, I don't even want to call it a crutch. Like, it can destroy your life if it's just like anything. You can't overuse anything. If you overeat, you're ruining your body. If you, over consume THC, you're ruining yourself. So I think it's just the through line is moderation. Like, know how to use it, know your tools that are available to you, and just don't get stupid with it.
Exactly. what you're saying there, but moderation. And then also, like, I mean, it's not everybody's body chemistry is different. So things work differently for everybody. Any one type of treatment or any one type of therapy isn't going to work for any, it's not a catch-all for everybody. That's, for racing thoughts in my mind at night and stuff, I'll use some marijuana and stuff. But you gotta pay attention, because I have kind of been like, all right, does this have an application during the day? Does this have, like, will this work here? Tried a few different things, and there's nothing wrong on that end, but you kind of find yourself like, all right, my work schedule is starting to pile up because I'm not doing as much stuff, and I might be chilled out, but you also have to be, all right, that's affecting your drive, or that's affecting, maybe you get the munchies from a particular strain or something, and that's even, even going into the whole terpene strain, for every different strain and stuff is different. So you have to really track that stuff to figure out, hey, this works for my body chemistry, or this works for aches and pains, but doesn't work on this end of things. And that was one of the episodes I talked about, and this is actually something I want to get more in depth down the road about, is the whole psychedelic medicine end of things. I know I spoke to, who was it, Wiz Buckley, about his organization, No Fallen Heroes, and they do something with ibogaine treatments.
Yeah.
And just, I didn't know, once I started pulling it apart, there's actually, I originally had hit him up because I knew someone with a heroin addiction, and that was due to opioids that were introduced through Walter Reed during the recovery portion. But I didn't know that it also could rewire your neurons and brain chemistry and different stuff there to deal with things like Tourette's, or there's a whole bunch of dementia, I guess. It's really good for that too. So
it's bizarre how powerful that stuff is. I didn't, I went through an alternative medicine therapy that it wasn't ibogaine. It was 5-MeO-DMT. I did it through a facility and everything. And that I had reached in like a very dark place by that point. I was extremely suicidal, and I went and did that therapy, woke up, haven't had a single suicide thought since. Completely resolved it. And it's hard to put into words like what you experience while you're doing that therapy, but oh my God, it was the best and most terrifying thing that I've ever done. Like the ego death that starts with it, that's a pretty wild, pretty wild experience. And so it's not for everybody. And I think like alternative medicine, whatever it may be, ibogaine, ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT, whatever it is, I do support the fact that it has a place in medicine. What I don't support is people doing it without basically the guidance from professionals that should there be a medical emergency during it, there needs to be a way to address that. And some of the research that's being done, like they're figuring out a lot of great stuff about it, but I think we're really early into it. I think there's a lot of promise to it. And I've done a lot of coverage on that through Task and Purpose. Not recent, but after the whole shoot down on MDMA on Capitol Hill, and just like some of the arguments they made against it, I was pretty mad. I'm not going to lie. I didn't infuse that bias into my stories. I tried to show both sides of it with anything that was available. Some of the stuff the FDA was pointing out to me was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Other things they pointed out was like, oh, okay, yeah. Because like if there's going to be a medication for high blood pressure and they've tested it on, like 3 people, and are like, oh, look, it reduced their blood pressure. It's like, oh, wait, like that 5th and 6th person that uses it after it's been through the trials when it was tested on 3 people, and all of a sudden their kidneys are failing or their liver shuts down or something. Like they need to be like a very profound study executed on that. Any sort of medical intervention. I don't care if it's an actual surgical intervention, a medical like medicine-based intervention, like any of that stuff. I really do firmly believe in making sure that the studies are done thoroughly, professionally, not this just like kind of voodoo bullcrap. They were like, oh yeah, we trialed it. Or like, we got the emergency use authorization, like it's safe. It's like, oh, okay, I gotcha.
Well, you've had some instances, and For anybody that's even thinking about that end, I do have to say, I mean, it's set and setting is the biggest thing that I've heard anyway, is it has the biggest effect over everything. So if you're having, a bad trip, and you've dealt with that on the EMT side, I know I've heard some of the stories to where, I think it was LSD, which my wife also just recently, so she works at a hospital facility to where she sees that end of things. They bring people into the ER that are tripping balls because they they went off and took some stuff that they definitely shouldn't have, and it was experimental, and they're just geeking out on LSD, and they're fine afterwards. But um, yes, people that use it recreationally or without respect of that end of things, it doesn't end very well.
Yep. I mean, ketamine's a great example of that. That's been a street drug for a long time, but it's also something that we carried on the ambulance in Minneapolis, and I carry
Yeah.
it here where I work in New Hampshire, and people still have that stigma about it. But I'm a very strong advocate of that medication being used in emergency settings because it has such a profound impact where it separates your brain from feeling pain.
Yeah.
So it's not a narcotic. It's not addictive in that sense. It doesn't affect those opioid receptors. But if you know how to give it to people, because if you like draw it up and slam it through the IV, like they're not going to have a good time. But one
Yeah.
of the things I developed with it, especially in Minneapolis, because they were doing so much studying on it, is if you get them to picture like a happy place or like whatever makes them feel good as you're slowly infusing it and it's diluted with saline, and you do a long slow push on it and you
Mm.
keep talking them through those good things, that locks their brain in that good thing, and then there's no bad trip coming from it. And
Mm.
I've also seen the adverse side of it where you have, I know the excited delirium thing is uh, a very taboo subject nowadays, but based on what I've seen just in my own experience as a medic in Minneapolis, when people go hyperthermic and their superhuman strength is there, like anybody that says it's not real, I'll ask them, have you ever seen it? And if they
Yeah.
say no, I'd be like, all right, keep your opinions to yourself. I don't want to hear it. I've had one dude that left bruises of his hands on my forearms after he ripped out of the soft restraints on our stretcher and threw me and two Minneapolis cops around the back of an ambulance for the ride to the hospital. I gave
Wow.
him, think it was almost a full gram of ketamine, just an IM injection trying to slow him down. Background is he was on PCP. He was known for, every month this would happen. I just happened to be the lucky guy to get called to that one. And big NFL linebacker looking dude, and man, that ketamine didn't touch him. And it got to a point where that was the one and only time that I felt like I was fighting for my life working as a paramedic. And that was one of those eye-opening experiences of like, okay, ketamine has its uses, but we also have to understand when it's not going to work. And that was one of those scenarios where it didn't really work. He started to slow down by the time we pulled up to the hospital, but my God, the only thing that took him down was like he got paralytic and intubated the minute we got him into the hospital. And it's a dangerous game because once their body gets wrapped up like that, it creates acidosis. And if you don't address that, it's not just giving them ketamine, it's giving them stuff to help their body re-regulate again. Otherwise, they'll go into cardiac arrest, and that's why that stigma is there. The research needs to continue on that stuff, but I think ketamine's a great example of like there's a heavy stigma on it because of its street use, but it does have very practical and important use, whether it's pain, whether it's like behavioral emergencies or psychological emergencies, stuff like that. Not to like ramble on it, but
It's weird because a lot of this stuff got demonized back in the 70s and stuff, like late 60s, early 70s. And this stuff, you have MDMA, which was making a bunch of changes, but then you have someone talking about how they're going to put it into the water, and that's when the government was like, whoa, whoa, and they're making it, because I mean, that's just going off that far deep end. And again, it's like, hey, slow your roll. We need to check on this. But instead of, either regulating it or dialing it back and being like, hey, look, let's open up research on it and do it properly and figure this out. they just banned it overall and kind of demonized this stuff that has really been helpful for a lot of veterans out there, or it has good applications within the mental health space, which it just seems like we're having more and more issues on that end now. Um, but then you want to, if you go back into like Native Americans, uh, they actually had procedures with the sweat lodge. Like, so just drawing a parallel in between combat veterans and what they've had with psychedelics and stuff is that I've seen and looked through and started to like delve into it. And I actually want to bring someone on the show to talk about it, but that whole sweat lodge experience and the fact that when they came back from a war party, they would actually go through a sequence of events that were really meant to bring them back.
Yeah. Well, I think like any adverse thing you go through, whether it's combat or I think it just boils down to like a very stressful period, whether it's 10 minutes or whether it's a drawn out, like dudes that were in Fallujah just in the shit for God, days and days and days, weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's stacked on itself. The kind of like physiological effect that has on the individual's body is extreme. And
Yeah.
if it's not addressed, like that's how we end up with a lot of these issues. And like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional researcher. I just think there's enough evidence out there to where we can start to put this stuff together and realize like, okay, maybe some of the stuff they did back in the day, like with the Native Americans and their war parties and how they got them right again. Because I don't know. There's a very good friend of mine told me at one point that humans by their very nature are violent. There's examples of that throughout the beginning of time to current day.
Yeah.
So is it the actual violence that bothers people, or is it something else? And sometimes it's a moral injury that can manifest and become this just thorn in your side as far as like your mental health. And your mental health and physical health are so correlated and interlaced that I just don't think we're doing enough to really hit on both ends of that. It's
Yeah.
just like some of the studies I've seen about the fascia that covers all your musculature. We never really thought much of it. It's like, oh, it's a covering, but it's come to find out you get damage to that fascia, and all of a sudden you're having musculoskeletal issues, and it's something about the balance in there. I'm not a
Mm.
smart enough man to like really get into it, but when you see something like that where it's like, oh, that's a nothing burger, like don't worry about that. You got to cut that damaged your fascia, like sucks, but here's some stitches, you'll be fine. But then you start seeing these different problems, especially with the more major injuries, and it's like, wow, okay, maybe there's some more research warranted there.
That's one of the things we do too is we just look at modern medicine and stuff, or at least up until there. I feel like we're at the cusp of starting to do things to where they're starting to look at it and say, hey, maybe we should look at a few other things before we start cutting into this person and do this particular surgery. Maybe strengthen up some of the other muscles, on that end to compensate. Because if we do that, we're just going to look at it. It almost seems like once you go through that first surgery, then there's another one, and then there's another one, and it's
Oh
almost
yeah.
like, what's going on here? Are you actually fixing the problem, or are we just uh, drawing straws,
Yep.
grasping at thin air kind of thing?
100%. That's why I think having like that very well thought through plan when you have a problem that you're fixing, especially if there's surgery involved, you really got to think long term of like how is that going to play out.
Yeah.
I have too many things that I could reference that with between my hips and my neck and my spine and all that stuff. But like one of the things that I've been talked to from my doctors is like, we got to fix your neck eventually. But I was like, well, hold on. Like, do we have to jump right into that? Because I know doctors hate to hear well, I know my buddy that did this. And it's like, well, it's not just one buddy. It's like several people that are close friends or families that have had, the cage put around their vertebrae to restructure it or stuff like that, where they just end up going back in and going back in and going back in.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon, like, they're going to end up with like their whole neck fused. And that's not what I'm trying to deal with. I don't like waking up with my hands and arms numb every morning, but I also don't want to like have to like do a side sit up to get out of bed because I can't move my neck. So
I knew someone that we actually went to a theme park with them. We were out for a reunion type event, and we all dragged him out to a theme park, and he's kind of the older guy, but he had an airborne injury to where they finally ended up fusing his neck. And I think it was by the third ride, he was like, guys, I got to sit the rest of the time out. And we're like, dude, we haven't even hit the big ones yet, you know? And he's
Yeah.
just like, no, you don't understand. Like, I probably shouldn't have come out here with you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's some pretty crazy stuff. I mean, I think it's all about how you approach it. Like I'm gonna be due for like bilateral hip replacement. Like at some point, I had surgeries on both sides that gave me more time before they have to do the big one.
Yeah.
But despite that, you know, like I was still able to go summit Kilimanjaro in October. Like, was it tough to do? Yes, but is it possible? It's doable. Like you can still live your life. Absolutely. I think it's just when it gets to that like debilitating pain level where something's got to be done. I think
Yeah.
stem cells should absolutely stay in the conversation. The research should continue to be done on that, and really evaluate. I know like some of the concerns that you infuse like stem cells into somebody, it could find a place and manifest into a tumor, whether it be benign or cancerous. But you know, like how many people have had it so far? A lot of people in the vet space have gone down to Mexico City or some of the other facilities that are out there and have just profound recoveries from major injuries. And it's like, okay, like there's something there. That's
Exactly.
it's just the trick of like getting your health insurance to cover it. Otherwise, you're paying out of pocket like $13,000 to like $30,000 at a time, and it's like not your average person's capability.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things too is like are these cutting edge things that are working, um, are they only going to be available to a certain class of people, you know? And that's where you start running into that end, and why do insurance companies run certain ways, and you know, it's almost like pharmaceutical and certain things are put into place and work as a system with each other instead of
Yeah.
allowing some of these new ones into the space, just for that very reason of there's been a lot of talk, there's been conjecture and everything else, and you kind of look at it and you have to scratch your head and wonder like, wait a second, what is going on here? Do they actually want to fix people?
Yep.
What happened to your Hippocratic oath?
Yeah. 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 That's out of. I do love that oath too. I know it from the medicine side, but it was also something I heard a lot in journalism. Do
Yeah.
no harm. Do no harm. It's just one of those things where I think you could apply that basically in every aspect of the work field or careers and whatever you're doing. But um, you know, I think that should be a golden rule for every person in our world of do no harm, do no harm. Understand what that means, apply it to your life. And I don't think we'd have so much madness in the world if people actually followed that.
Yeah, and let's actually shift to that. Let's talk about the journalism end of things, because I mean, really, that's where you've been, where your passion kind of lies. And I know, man, you went from what was first? Was it the photography aspect of it, like that end, or was it the writing end where you started?
Photojournalism and writing kind of kicked off on a professional level. I've been a storyteller for my whole life, and that's kind of my catch-all term for what I do.
Yeah.
Like I've been writing short stories and like epic tales since I was a kid. None of them have seen the light of day, but I love creative writing, and I've done that for a long time. And then towards the point where I hit burnout as a medic when I was working in Minneapolis, my brother, God bless him, was like, "Hey, we need somebody that can do first responder coverage. There's not a lot of people in this space that have done the job and are good at writing. You want to give it a shot?" And so he offered for me to publish some like basically essay type pieces on like what a call is like and stuff like that. And in doing that, I found like it was a really good like pressure release for me to just kind of get it out. Once you write it down, you can't really take it back.
Yeah.
And some of those calls were things that haunted me for a long time. And I felt like as I was writing about it, I felt better about it. And so I was like, oh,
Hmm.
maybe there's something here. And then there was an event where Marcus Luttrell and Travis Pastrana and a few others were on this one lap around America. I might be butchering the title of that race, but basically they're in these rally cars and they'd race each other. I don't know the rules of it, but basically go to each like drag strip or racetrack and they do their timetables and see how they're going to perform on that.
And I think it's
There we go.
one lap of America, or so. I know which one you're talking about. They used
Yeah.
to feature it in Road and Track and stuff all the time. And it's my background. I actually know Pastrana from prior military stuff
Yeah.
back in 2007 and 8 from the Rally America and a few of the others. Um, good dude. Good
Yeah.
dude.
And like when they stopped out a track that was just down the road from where I lived in Minnesota, I lived in Big Lake for a long time, and I would commute into the city for my job. And my brother was with him, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to just bring your camera out, and I'll pay you a day rate just as a freelance photographer, and just see what you can get?" And I was very new to like a DSLR at that point. I grew up with like film type stuff, like disposable
Yep.
cameras, and I'd take that in and get it developed, but still kind of had an eye for it. I went out there and got to meet all these dudes that I've always been like either fascinated by or a fan of, and just seeing how chill they were, and like, oh, like these, like they're just a normal ass person, you know, like they're not
Yeah.
like these gods that some people make them out to be. And that day rate was more than what I would make in a 12-hour shift as a critical care paramedic, and that was like the thing of like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, this is fun, it's creative, it's just good for the soul, and I get paid a decent rate. Like, this sounds pretty enticing. And that was my segue into it. And one of my first I did a couple freelance pieces for Coffee or Die magazine. They did pretty good. As far as my writing was used to writing patient charts at the time, so God bless my editors, like, you know, running me through it. I felt like a private in the army again, of like, stop doing that, don't do that, do this, do that. So that first piece was rough, and then by the second one it got better. And I have no degree like in a professional sense from a college or anything like that. I've done enough college classes, but I never saw it through because I get irritated with campus or college basically. But anyways, once I got those couple stories out there, then my managing editor at the time, because my brother can't really make those decisions when we're related, but Katie offered like a staff writer position to stay on like the first responder vertical for Coffee or Die magazine. And not long after that was when George Floyd was murdered. And since that happened in the city I was working in, I kind of knew it pretty well. So I offered to like go down and do some coverage. And so one of my first reporting gigs was when, you know, the peaceful protest dissolved into out just citywide riots. And that was one of my first experiences seeing how publications will cover things differently. I was in the same spot as a bunch of the mainstream media crews outside of the third precinct, and their stories were being published as peaceful protests. Cops use this against the peaceful protesters. Like, the advanced auto across the street was literally Molotoved. There's nothing peaceful about that.
Yeah.
They were throwing bricks and piss bottles at the cops before they ever did anything. And then, I think our publication was one of the first to make that distinguish between those two things of like, was there peaceful protests sitting and kneeling outside of the third precinct and holding up signs and yelling at them and stuff? Yes. But as it got later in the day, it just absolutely fell into pure riot. And you had dudes running around with chainsaws. You had people getting into fights. You had people throwing bricks at the cops. Like, that's not peaceful. And so that was one of my first experiences as a journalist. And I filmed a video that went out on YouTube, and I thought it did pretty good as far as like showing what was actually going on. And that's what I've been obsessed with ever since, of like, there's a truth to every story out there. And as long as you can get out on the ground and be an observer, don't interact with anybody, but be an observer, see what's going on, write your story showing both sides of that. And that's how my coverage worked throughout that time period. Because I was on the ground outside of Brooklyn Center when that created another riot at that point. I mean, there's a dude walking around with the Captain America outfit, but it wasn't Captain America, it was Captain Anarchy. So he had the anarchy symbol on his shield, anarchy symbol on his helmet, and he was throwing bricks and all sorts of stuff at the cops. It's like, okay. So I've been obsessed with it ever since that, because I saw how some reporters were obviously not telling the whole story. There is some that overly leaned on, oh, it's pure riot, like these guys are you know, anti 2A, anti-cop, and like there was no like middle ground. And that's what I think journalism needs to be, is like there's two sides to every story. They both need to be shown, and sometimes
Yeah.
people don't like that, especially war crimes on deployments. Like nobody wants that stuff in the news because they don't want
Yeah.
that to hurt the appearance of our military. But at the same time, journalism is meant to show both sides of things. Like,
Yep.
is war pretty? No. Is policing pretty? No. Anybody that thinks it should look like, oh, hey, buddy, can you just get my cop car? And like, if they just got caught selling a bunch of crack, like, they're not going to just walk into a cop car, and the cops aren't going to take any risks. So it's just like the ability to tell the truth of what's going on. Like, I am enthralled with that.
How was that going through and watching all this unfold in front of you? It definitely had to be daunting. I know a lot of the journalists and stuff out there probably shied away from, hey, like, look, let's just hang back here and report on this instead of getting into the thick of it, because it got nuts.
Luckily, I did, like, because I worked in the city for so long. I knew some of the officers at the 3rd precinct, and so I had texted them like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to be out there reporting. Here's what I'm wearing, and I wore a specific like black hoodie with a brewery symbol on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you just please not launch any like less lethal at me? And I inhaled a boatload of CS gas. The stuff that the cops were using, to me, it felt worse than the gas chamber when I was in basic. So that was eye-opening. But the cool thing about it was the peaceful protesters that kind of got pushed off to the side, they had like gallons and gallons of milk. So if you got it in your eyes or you got doused with that gas, they were like handing out these gallons of milk to people, whether they liked you or not. If you were suffering from it, they're like, pour this over yourself. And I can't eat dairy. It doesn't go well. So when she handed it to me, I was like, oh no, I don't, no milk for me, please. And she's like, no, pour it in your eyes. And I was like, what? And it sure as hell it worked. But I just think that's like kind of, I don't know, I don't want to sound too corny, but there's a very beautiful tragic aspect of these kind of events where you see like what good people are capable of, even in the midst of, I mean, these giant mortar fireworks going off, buildings on fire, people are running around with like chainsaws and just looting buildings and stuff. I watched the Target on the other side of the street by the precinct just absolutely get cleaned out. People running out with big TVs, Xboxes, and it's like, okay, what part of that has to do with the fact that you're protesting against the police? It doesn't. It's just people capitalizing on the opportunity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like my tattoo studio was just down the street over there. And so I couldn't finish my sleep for a long time because everything got closed down and boarded up and took a while. I finally did get it finished, but it's just one of those, I think the overall experience, I can't compare it to like when I was in regiment during the training cycle, like the training's difficult. And I guess I don't know if it's still accurate today, but one of the things I was told when I first got there is like more Rangers die in training than at war. So like take it seriously. Don't dick around when you're doing this style of training. And when you're doing live fire training, with platoon live fires or stuff like that, and like where we were at, where they're launching live goose rounds and stuff, or launching mortars, like all that overpressure is real. It's something that really opens your eyes and kind of puts you into that fight mode. I don't know what combat's like, so I can't say if it's comparable, but between like kind of the thrill of calling in a fire, I was a fister for a regiment, so I got to go over to Campbell and do fire missions, and some of them got pretty close with as far as like the targets our FSNCO and FSO was giving us to call hits on, and seeing, like just Spooky dropping those 120s from the sky under night vision is just one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. Come to find out, those clouds aren't good for you to breathe in, but that thrill was always like an exciting thrill for me during the actual bona fide riot activity. That's when you start to think like, ooh, should I be here?
That's in America as well. I mean, and it's wild to see it like just very quickly develop into situations that you would never think in America that this is going down, but it does. It doesn't really matter. I mean, whether it's man, it just reminds me of like when you see some of this stuff out there, some of the things that you see out in Africa or just where it devolves into this just crazy, like people just go nuts, and you're
Yep.
like, what is happening here?
It's just uh unfiltered anger and chaos that unfolds. And during the Minneapolis coverage that I was doing, that's probably, I can't say I was like scared for my life until I think I ended up leaving the area. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning when things started, like it hit a new level of like, okay, people are just attacking each other at this point. I had a
Yeah.
couple dudes, I don't know if they were gangbangers or what. They were wearing colors. I've worked in the city long enough to know what to look for. And one guy came up and saw my camera. He's like, "Hey, motherfucker, like, what are you doing filming me?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"I wasn't filming you." And I think it was just working as a medic in the city. Like I've had to deal with that kind of attitude for years at that point, especially when there's a drive-by shootings and stuff. You have a bunch of gangbangers out there. When you show up, sometimes you do get hassled by some of the people. You don't know who's responsible for what, so you have to
Yeah.
know how to talk to people and de-escalate. I fancy I'm pretty confident, like I'm good at de-escalation. I don't want to sound egotistical. I've just put it to practice over a lot of years of being on the ambulance, and luckily I was able to talk him down. He was like, "Well, prove it." So I turned my camera around and I was like, "Look, I'll show you." Like I started
Yeah.
scrolling through my video footage and I was like, "Do you see your face in this?" And then he's like, "No, but what if you're just hiding it from me?" I was like, "Hold on a sec. Look at yourself. You have a bandana covering most of your face. You have a black hood over your face. Who is going to know who you are?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay, okay." And then he left me alone. And I was like, "Okay."
It sounded like he was searching for something to either pick on you or start a fight, or and that's, but you stood your ground and we're like, hey, look, no, this is the facts, and if I have it here, I'll gladly delete it. I have plenty of other stuff.
Yep.
It is like people, they get either in that aggressive mode or they have something in their head. I just want to cause some mayhem, and that's it. That's just what they're out to do. And you have that calm voice in there that says, hey, whoa, hold on, buddy. Like, look at this rationally. And sometimes
Yep.
they don't. You're lucky on that end, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a give and take scenario where you have to give them enough to show them like, okay, no, I'm not here to like put you on blast
Yeah.
on the news or anything, but you also have to kind of send that message without saying it directly of like, I'm not the one to fuck with. And
Yeah.
if you can present your argument to them, or conversation, I guess, of like, no, I'm not filming you. No, I'm not going to put you on blast. No, you're not going to touch my camera. Like it's a delicate balance that you maintain. And sometimes it doesn't work because
Yeah.
some people it just doesn't work on. I've just been lucky, I think, over the years with what's been going on, I guess. A little bit of skill, a little bit of luck.
It's worked out so far, right?
Yep.
And I know that's one of the things right now too, is it really seems like journalism, and you touched on it a second ago, but journalism's kind of going through, there's like a shift right now. You have a lot of the major media and some of the bigger outlets. You just see they're either cleaning house, or there's a lot of people up on the chopping block. I've known people from the Journal to be let go. And just multiple other outlets. It almost seems like I'm seeing things across the board. Some of the ones that I've touched base with during the book tour stuff, or people that I know in the field, and it's like, whoa, they were a good reporter. Like, what's going on here? And it almost seems like there's been a shift to where it's not really journalism anymore. They're either not showing both sides, they're being biased about it, or they're literally just creating clickbait content.
Yep.
And it's just sensationalism, and you're like, that's not journalism. That's not presenting both sides of the story. That was actually something in college for me. There was a class that I took on journalism, and I called the professor out on it at one point, and I'm like, hey, why are you inserting your biases into here? Like, that's literally, you're at a point where you're teaching the next generation here. And I know I'm the old cat in the back that you don't like to call on. Well, I think the one in particular was, she was talking about, and this was during the whole ghost gun thing, where somebody they uploaded the 3D printer plans for a lower receiver for an AR-15, and she was up in arms about that. And I was like, well, what do you know about an AR-15, and like, what do you know about printing one of these, and do you know about the strength of this stuff, and if it'll actually hold up to the overpressure, like the gas tube impingement and everything else. And she kind of looks at me, and I'm like, look, you grew up in this, your time during college and in the beginning of your journalism career was during the 70s and stuff. Like, do you want to talk to the kids about the anarchist cookbook? What's better, throwing that up there, or putting out a book that shows you how to make pipe bombs?
Right.
And after that, she kind of just was like full stop. And I'm like, it's the principle behind this. Like, I don't agree with that either, but it's the principle behind it on why he did it. And I honestly don't see too much harm in it. But I can understand. I can understand the concern. I can understand bad actors getting a hold of that and figuring out a way to, now they have metal 3D printers. They didn't have that back then. So if you uploaded those plans, what do you got? But
yeah, and I think that's where some like phenomenal journalists out there kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And I won't point to anyone in particular, but I've seen how they'll report like a profound piece. It's well written, it's well reported, but the one thing missing from it is both sides. And it's like, you did a great job showing this side. Why not present this? And I had an editor, is Carl Prine. He was just uh, one of the best investigative journalists I've ever talked to, let alone been instructed by. And man, it felt like I was getting smacked over the head with a hammer some days, because he's like, no, you can't do that. And it was something, I remember there was a piece I was writing. I think it was like an officer that was accused of molesting somebody. And I was like, man, that's wild. And he's like, okay, here's what we got to do. We have to talk to the officer, which is likely not going to happen. It's going to be the officer's attorney. I was like, okay, so I'll get that story. And he's like, well, hold on. You got to try to reach out to the alleged victim too. You got to get both sides of it. I was like, what? You want me to talk to somebody that is accusing a cop of being molested and the trial's not done? He's like, that's how you write it though, is you present both sides and you make sure people understand nobody's been convicted. Nobody's, in like, there's a part of it too where some people see that somebody's charged with something, and in their head, that means they've been convicted and sentenced. That's not what it is. And so, like, over that time working with Carl as my editor, he really built it into my head of like, no matter what it is, even if it's going to get some hate from your buddies, because you're hitting on a topic that they strongly oppose or they strongly support, and you're showing the other side of it, you just have to be ready to do that as a journalist. And I think that there's many examples of that. And I don't, some of the journalists out there, I don't think they're vindictive or malicious about their intentions behind it. I think it's when you just work for a publication and the editorial direction is in one direction, you end up getting to this place where it is kind of one-sided coverage. And I think we need to dial that back a little bit and really break it down of like, okay, as an example, like our current president, he wants to do this. Okay, point out pros and cons of that. Don't just point out the cons. Like, present it in a way where the person reading the story can read both sides of it, good and bad. Yeah. And then they, as the reader, can decide if they like that, if they support that. Like, let them make their own opinion. Don't form the opinion in the story. You just got to show both sides of it. And that to me is what, like, the basis of journalism should be. I just think we're missing that a little bit. Some of the smaller publications, I think they do a great job of both sides.
What do you think has led to kind of do you think, like, kind of partially the speed of information these days? Like you were saying before, if somebody has a phone or something, you can live stream something like a riot, and it's however many people you have in the crowd, because each one of them, chances are they probably have a cell phone in their pocket. So between that and the speed of the news cycle, these things take time.
Yeah.
I can't remember what story you said something about, but sometimes you're working on something for months before you're actually even writing the story. And that story might only be, 1,000, 2,000 words, and to fit everything that you need to, that you just worked on for the last 3 months, into essentially a blurb.
Yep.
It's costly. But to do it properly, and it's these days, it's almost like either the speed of the news cycle is leading to that, to where they're like, well, we have to get ahead of it. We got to get ahead of the story. We got to,
Yep.
and they sort of ignore the facts during it because they're just promoting the sensationalism or that beginning hit of it, to where you're getting that emotional rise right in the beginning, but it's like you don't fully understand the full situation.
Well, I think it's a complex problem. I think on one end, the speed of the news cycle is as fast as it is because of technology, the stuff that we have right now, where information is readily available. Whereas back in the day, there was a newspaper people got their information from. That took time to put that newspaper together. Did they get really fast at it? Absolutely. Like I mean, you look at the New York Times, they're still doing newspapers, and they
Yeah.
turn it around like crazy, and you can see them all over the place. Um, and I think that's one side of it. But when you have social media, you have the live streaming capabilities through an abundance of apps. I mean, there's got to be hundreds of them at this point. I
Oh
know
yeah.
the main ones, like between Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, stuff like that, or X. Sorry, it's not Twitter anymore, I guess. But um, you have all these things where people aren't necessarily going to the news site anymore to get their information, because on their social media feed, when they're doom scrolling at night or during the day or on break or whatever, they're seeing like these live streams, and they're like, oh well, why would I read that story if I can just see what's actually happening? But what they're
Mhm.
not understanding, I saw this a lot in Minneapolis too, where people were becoming citizen journalists, where they've never worked in it, they have no formal training, and they were running around saying, I'm a journalist, you cop can't touch me. And yet it's the same dude that just threw a brick at the cops like 5 minutes earlier. Like, no, if you're going to be a journalist, you're an observer. And there's, I forget who posed the question to me. It was for conflict reporting. Like, if you're the journalist on the ground and you see somebody about to get shot on the side you're covering, do you say something to them to prevent it from happening, or do you do something to intervene, or do you stay there as the journalist and observe? It's a very complicated, moral, challenging question, and I don't know, I still debate about it in my head constantly, because one side of my brain's a paramedic brain. Of course I want to help somebody, I want to keep them from dying. On the other side is the journalism side of, well, if I intervene, then now you're affecting the news, and now you violated some rules of journalism. Like, so it's a very tentative thing, and that's why I think you have like the line of like what journalism actually is skewed by these people will be like, oh, I'm a journalist, raise their hand, and then they're running around with the camera. They're
Yeah.
giving straight opinion, like blurbs as they're recording. It's not unbiased. It's not the pros and cons. It's not a
Yeah.
balanced presentation of what they're seeing. And for a lot of people, that's hard. We're inherently biased creatures on this world. Like, you have to like really beat it into your head to keep yourself from going down that biased route. And I think that's part of the problem. The other part is just purely the audience side. If you publish like, this trial is starting, here's who's involved, what's going on, and if so far the only thing released is I'll use the cop example, Cam. If it's the cop is accused of all these different things or charged with all these things, and that's all the story talks about, what's the odds that the person that read that story is going to come back for the follow-up story that's 8 months later, showing like, oh, he was actually acquitted of all these things, it was a false accusation, it was
Mhm.
this. I don't know. I don't think people are coming back 8 months later to read a follow up on a 500-word news hit, because they kind of got their answer in that first one. And that's where I don't, I'm not a super experienced like senior editor or managing editor or EIC or anything. So that's why I have a lot of respect for my bosses I've worked under over the years, of like, those are some tough decisions to make, of like, how do you do your coverage? Do you not do that initial story and be accused of intentionally not covering it? Do you do the story and make sure there's a very strong presence in the story, clarifying like, hey, this is somebody that's charged, they're not convicted, that means they're innocent until proven guilty? Like,
Mhm.
people like, are the people reading the story going to actually read that part, or are they just going to read the intro and the nut graph, the lead in the nut graph, and then bounce out of the story and move on to the next one?
Yeah.
um I don't think the problem is solely on a journalist's shoulder. I think like the people as the audience, the readers out there, they have to go into it using critical thinking and some well-formed logic. Like, understand, like, if somebody's charged, know what that means. If somebody's convicted, know what that means. If they're when they get a sentence, understand what's there. And if you write a story explaining how all that stuff works, it's really dry. It's not very entertaining. You're probably not going to get too many people clicking on that and reading it. But if we can get things shifting towards that way, like if you don't know what it is, hop on the Google machine and figure it out. Like, go figure out. If you don't understand how the court process works, refresh your memory on that, then go read the story so you can really digest what you just read.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I gave you an answer to your question. I feel like that was long-winded.
I was gonna say we just developed into a conversation type thing to where, I mean, really, that's you looked at it from a few different ways too, though, right there, where it's you're just doing exactly what you were trained to do right there. It's you talk about some of the hurdles that you're facing as a journalist and how to prevent it, but also the audience end of things and putting some ends on there to, like, hey, be an informed audience as well. If you're going to delve into a topic, don't be emotionally invested that it's this way right from the very start, and have a little bit of a background behind it and know what you're getting yourself into, which is really these days you have a lot of people that just jump to it or jump into something without realizing what they're getting themselves into. Case in point, creating podcasts that talk. No, I'm just no, but really it is. There is an element of sensationalism. I don't think that. I think they're trying to figure things out through some of the social media end of things, integrating with the news end. We've sort of seen a lot of that. You were just mentioning newspapers. The Times is one of the few that's still actually publishing a hard print newspaper. A lot of them have gone full digital just to the fact that they're like, we can just we don't have the means to keep up with this anymore, and we got to move
It's
to
expensive
digital.
to maintain. I mean, hell, when Coffee or Die ran the magazine, like an actual print magazine, it's one of the best that I've seen. I can
Yeah.
be accused of bias on that, but I've never seen anything like that. And on one end of it, you have to understand too, like a magazine versus a newspaper, those are very different things. Some of these
Mm-hmm.
magazines, people read it as fact in, like a news-based approach when it's just entertainment. It's
Yeah.
entertaining, it's inspiring, it's informing, but is there bias infused into a magazine? Likely.
Yeah.
Like those magazines are created for a certain demographic, a certain audience. So that's why you have some people that love it and some people that hate it. But newspapers, like editorial strategy being laid out through news coverage, like, you have to understand that that's supposed to be unbiased. It's supposed to show you both sides of things. Some people will get mad and be like, well, why would you talk about that? That's like anti-Second Amendment stuff. And that, you'll, like, I've had my friends, when I became a journalist, holy smoke, some of the cops I was buddies with, like, they wrote me off immediately. Like, how dare you go to that side? And I'm like, what do you mean? I got into this to show that it's not what it is, like
Yeah.
what you're accusing it of. And like, if I'm doing it, your buddy, who we've trusted each other on calls over the years, you should trust the fact that I'm not gonna, like, just be a biased journalist when I tell you I'm trying to get into this to either just prove the fact that it is broken or prove the fact, like, it isn't broken, but here's what I'm seeing.
Yep.
And I feel like there's a mix of that I've experienced over the years where I don't think journalism is this big bad thing people are accusing it of. I don't think it's broken. I think there's some flaws in the system that need to, like, we got to figure out a way to meet this new generation where they're very focused on social media and stuff. We have to figure out a way to get the information to them, but also keep them reading, like, keep them informed on it. Because if they read a news story, they're like, yeah, they're biased. Like, that doesn't support my views. And like, my greatest example I love to give, like, I grew up in South Dakota. It's a very conservative state. And when you look at all these different houses at night, what's the news channel they're streaming? Fox News. Do you ever see CNN on? Some homes, yes. But I always challenge people to, if you don't like reading your news and you're watching it, and mind you, watching your news, you should, like, do that for entertainment. Don't do that to get your information. But if you are going to do that, watch Fox News, watch CNN, see how they're covering it, and now you're getting both sides of it. Now you're getting opposing views on it, and now you yourself can form your opinion. If in today's like news world, especially with some of these mainstream publications, read a story from them, read another one from the opposing publication, for lack of a better term. Now you have both sides. I wish it could just be all in one story. It's just with some places that's just not how you're gonna get it. And I think it's on the audience again, like do your due diligence and make sure that you're reading up on everything.
Well, we're even running into a a shift there as well. You look at the fact of media for the longest time, kind of just conglomerated into these huge, people don't realize like just how big, like, just to throw one out there, like the Murdoch, with how many channels and how many everything else that they own. And you start to see it in things when they start to, I know they use it as a very anti-left rhetoric, but at the same time you look at it and it's undeniable that it happens, to where they put a script out to all these anchor reporters and they're like, hey, this is the news, and you see it echoed across these channels and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. And that's really just that the fact that it's become a monopoly with a lot of them. And it's like, do you really want, because when you have that happen, there is bias there because there's money in it, whether it be stocks held or a stake held in something. When it gets to that point and there's shareholders and everything, and something starts running like a corporation versus let's present the real news, instead of, hey, we need to be, I guess, answerable to our shareholders and give them the best profit margin that they can get. It's like, that's not right. The news should not be something that is looked at as a, hey, we're going to turn a profit here. I understand, to perpetuate it, you have to. So you got to have X amount of subscribers, which comes to the fact of, well, then maybe you should look at going back to presenting a good story.
And that's the challenging part for journalists, I think, is how do you take what's going on and make it enticing so that people will actually read it, actually become informed? Because if you approach it dry, nobody's going to read your stuff. You have to infuse something that draws their interest. And one of the rules an editor taught me early on is, if you don't hook them in the first 10 words, they're not going to read your story. So that those first 10 words have to have a very strong hook to draw people in. And at that point, it's opinion based, right? Well, whose opinion is best when it comes to what are those 10 words? And that's why there's an editorial process. That's what I love about it, is my rough draft will change as it goes through the hands of copy editors, senior editors, managing editors. And some of them, if it's a very delicate, hot button topic in the community, the EIC will weigh in and make sure it's not going to like be something that they'll have to pull down because they missed something, or it's too one-sided, or it doesn't present both sides enough and stuff. And that's where like you have to be very careful about how you're publishing stuff. And I think a lot of places do a good job of that. But I also see other places that don't do a good job of it. And I don't think it's only on the publication or the journalists themselves. I think the audience needs to be open-minded and informed. They need to do their due diligence with their research if they're going to dive into a topic they're not used to. Like the whole tariff conversation right now. If you didn't know jack squat about tariffs before, you should be reading up on that before you go watching the talking head stuff on whatever live stream that's out there, whatever subject matter expert that's providing their opinion. You should know the basics before you start waging into that, because if you're just saying, like, screw these tariffs, you're going to ruin the country, but you don't know how it works, or you don't know what that plays into our economy or the global economy, like, slow down, take a step back, take a knee, inform yourself. Find the stuff that's out there, teach yourself what that is, and then go figure out if you're going to like what is going on currently. And I just think it's such a complex issue that's at hand right now, between technology, people's attention spans. I mean, hell, if you do anything over a 30-second video, odds are people aren't going to watch past that. Like, the attention span is limited.
I've started to, like, I think it's the first 3 seconds of video, like, you have to have something. So if you don't have that, it's the same thing. You know, people's attention spans just they shorten up. So what you're talking about with the 10 words of the social media aspect on these, when I put out the promotional clips of, and finding like, all right, how do I shift this, but keep it about the person who's speaking on this clip or on this sound bite, but gather the attention of it. And because there's so much out there, and there's the ability of someone to just like Joe Schmo to jump into it,
Yep.
you know, and be like, all right, like, let me learn this stuff and know who's presenting this stuff too, because there is bias infused, whether you like it or not. But it's how close can you get to that neutral end of things, you know, as well as keeping your audience, I guess, captured or listening, you know, and long form is, you know, it's interesting to see the difference in like the consumption on shorts versus the long form, versus even sometimes like they'll even just after 10 minutes of long form and it's, well, you lost them. All right, what happened here? You know, where did we lose them? Why? How do I keep that up? Or they actually consume the whole thing? Or, you know, what was it about that particular person? Were they a returning listener? Did that turn them off in that episode? Did they come back to it? It's interesting to see the metrics end of it kind of thing. I'm still looking at that and figuring that end out. And I think that is part of the cool aspect digitally anyway, for someone like that to look at it and really hone it out and be like, did someone scroll through the whole article, or did somebody watch the whole video content there? And you can see correlations in where you lost them, or where you're doing good, or what's hitting, what's not, what people are interested in. And it's a science behind it.
And
for people that just think they can just get out there, it's
absolutely. I think that's why like the multimedia approach it's essential in today's world, because you're not going to get everybody that's into listening to a 3-hour long podcast or reading a 3,000 word like long form narrative essay, or, you know, stuff like that. So you got to figure out like, okay, for this part of the audience, they'll eat it up because that's what they're into. For this other version, do you write like a shorter version of that long form essay so that they still get the information? It's just not going to be as beefed up with the details or like events and stuff like that. I still hang my hat on the piece I did on Operation Red Wings, where it shows the Night Stalkers side of everything. It barely touches on the Navy SEALs, because we've seen a lot of information and coverage on the SEAL side of it. But I wanted to show like, what was it like for everybody else involved there? And that story broke our website because so many people read it. And I was kind of shocked because it's so long after the initial operation, so long after like that initial coverage on everything. And I think it was just like, you have to find all the angles of these things. And that's we've talked about this before, is if something's been covered relentlessly, there's always a new angle you can show like a fresh take on it that gives you new information about it. And then all of a sudden people are seeing that as like, I didn't know that. And then they're like, I need to read more. And then they're getting involved in it. And that's tough to do. It sometimes it takes years and years and years for somebody to find that new angle, and then boom, it's out there and it crushes and people are reading the hell out of it, or people are clicking on that video that went out and they're trying to learn more. And then now all of a sudden they're going down that rabbit hole and you're seeing other related stories on your site, picking up some steam on the metric side. And it's like, oh, that worked. And so like, once you find that fresh angle, people eat that up. And I think that's what's important. And you're not going to win everybody. That's just the simple truth of it. Like, you might have like a core audience that comes to your stuff, but you won't always get everybody with that. I think that's like what people want, is you want everybody to come and listen to the podcast or your YouTube series or your reader stories on your website, or, you know, stuff like that. But the simple truth is you're just never going to get everyone. So you got to figure out who your audience is, define it, and apply, like work towards like, what does the audience want? And it's not easy, but people are figuring it out.
Showing those other ends of things and staying true to it too. I mean, obviously that's the biggest thing, is like, yeah, you got the angle or another set of eyes, but all right, make sure that this is the truthful end of things. But you have, you just have these dynamic stories like during the GWAT. There's been so many different books that have come out: Navy SEALs, Special Operations, Green Berets, Rangers. You know, you're almost guaranteed that if you can actually put something into a semblance of a story that you had happen to you overseas, and that was in some sort of dynamic capacity, and there's no shortage of that in the global war on terror. But if you have special operations or some sort of higher tier, it's almost guaranteed to get something. But I think we're starting to come into where, you know, we have these other books coming out from the guys that are on the ground to where people didn't realize. They're like, wait a minute. Oh, they just came in for hits. Like, you guys were sitting down in those villages for, you know, a year's time doing the same thing, or sitting, you know, gathering the target packages for those guys to come in and do that job.
Yep.
And experiencing the hell end of it. Oh, yep. Okay.
100%. That's something that's just blown me away since I got into like the military veteran type coverage. Is there's certain aspects of the GWAT I never knew. And when you sit down and talk to somebody that went through a hellacious like 3-month period where they're just getting hammered constantly, it's like, oh my God. That's why when you talk to some of these really experienced soft dudes, regardless of what unit they were in, like, it's not lost on them. Like, they know, like, it's a team approach essentially of like, when they're out doing their hits and stuff, like the conventional side is getting after it. They're getting things done. And a lot of them will say like what they did was the easy thing, because they get to go in, do their hit, and bounce out. They're not locked in on a battlefield for, 6 months straight, just getting hammered. Like, to me, it's wild. I still have some buddies from AIT that I talked to just recently, where they're telling me some of the stuff that they went through on deployment. So I was like, oh my God, dude, like, as a fister, like, you had the best layout ever. Like, dropping ordnance for days, like, that's awesome. Scary at the same time, but like, I think any one of us that get into a job like that, like, a bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah. we're eating it up. I know that is one thing. You do have that side where people, or they'll say, I'm sorry that happened to you, or man, that just must have been a really rough experience. And it was like, those extremes, quite honestly, at the time of my life, that was great. And it defined some of what I'm doing now, or defined the drive to what I'm doing now out there. So without that happening to me, this would never be. I'm glad that happened to me in a few different ways and stuff. Yes, it's terrifying, and yes, it's experiencing life to the extreme, but it's all sides of the spectrum. You might have something to where somebody ends up dying on the battlefield in front of you, or you have a mass cal incident or something like that, and it's unfortunate that stuff happens, but then you also see the end of what these guys do for each other and the lengths that they go, and how close these guys get on these either deployments or even field exercises. I mean, you want to really see a unit come together, throw them out in the field for 10 days and be like, hey, you guys are doing everything out of the freaking patrol base. But it does. It creates this cohesive bond, whether it's trauma bonding or, that single purpose that they're all focusing on, and that kind of is the glue that puts them together. It is what it is. There's all ends of it.
Yeah, and I think like not everybody's into stoicism, but there's a lot of like great stoics throughout history that have pointed to there's really no such thing as a bad thing that happens. Because no matter what, there's good that can come from every event in your life. Whether, like, in the moment, was it bad and tragic? Like, absolutely. You can't take that away. But the lessons learned afterwards, those are valuable. Like, that's, like, me getting myself in trouble in the Army and getting booted from regiment just directly into the civilian world, like, that messed with me for years. And I like through a lot of self-work and therapy and alternative medicine and stuff like that to be able to really figure out, basically understand my demons, know are they good or bad, and then come to this conclusion of like, was that one of the best times of my life? Absolutely. Like, I used to beat myself up about like never deploying as a Ranger. It's a weird thing, but one of my first gigs as a journalist was embedding in just an all-out riot that was just insane. I crossed the land border into Ukraine during the first 3 weeks of the invasion as a civilian. Like, it's weird when you do that and you're not carrying a gun. Like,
I,
it's a bizarre feeling. So I've been able to look back at all the bad stuff and realize, like, man, there's some great stuff that came from this.
and you never see it at the time too, like that
Wow.
journey or that path to bring you where you're at. And that is, again, you don't see it. I talked about it a few back to where I had an experience to where it was just profound, like on where you were talking before about the psychedelic end of things. And I got to see those splits on where those important decisions were made, but within each portion of my life, and see which different ways they branched out to, and different possibilities through there. And I'm like, man, you really are in a pretty good timeline. You might look down at certain stuff and all that, and it taught you certain lessons, but look at some of the other ones out there. You're doing okay.
Oh yeah.
You're doing all right.
I think that's just like, I hope anybody that hears me saying what I just did, like, I will never take it away from anybody. If they see something as bad and they won't recognize any sort of good things behind it, because it is a very difficult thing to do. Like, it's taken me close to 10 years to get to the point that I'm at. And it's not for everybody. Like, I don't think everybody will end up with the same mindset as me by any means. But I can't, I have to force myself to look for the silver linings and stuff, because when you go through tragic thing after tragic thing, like my family's been just like hit really hard by ALS. I've lost my dad to it, aunts and uncle. And like, is it hard to see like any sort of benefit or positive thing from those experiences? Absolutely. Like, it's taken me
Yeah.
years, but now I've been able to look at it, like, for my dad, like, he showed me what basically being fearless in the face of death truly is, like, what it looks like. What does it mean? Like, and to me, that's a positive thing. Like, do I wish I still had my dad here? Absolutely. Do I wish I never watched him go through what he did before he died? Like, absolutely. Like, I still struggle to find any sort of benefits from that. But at the same time, the lessons learned from that experience, they are helpful in my life today. And for that, like, I I would never ask for it, but it is what it is. You can't control what happens in life. So if you want to sit there and see it as a bad thing, that is completely up to the individual. But for me, I refuse to just dwell on the bad aspects of things. You got to find that silver lining.
Exactly. Yep. That you're exactly right on that one. And sometimes it's not always easy, and sometimes you need time to see that silver lining. It doesn't show up right away. Trust me. Sometimes you look back, years later, and you're like, oh, okay, this happened because now I'm going through this, or now I'm helping someone through this. This is why this happened. I didn't understand it at the time
Yep.
because you were right up on that problem. It was right in front of you instead of it being further away.
And that's why you don't walk up to somebody that just lost their dad and be like, let me tell you about the good things here that's coming from this. Like, there is a certain level of patience and perseverance that somebody has to have to, like, get on to the other side of that bad thing. And for everybody, it's different. Sometimes it takes a week. Sometimes it takes half a life. It's I think people just have to be careful with how they approach it. I know what I do for myself in my life. If people want to hear what I do, I'm happy to talk through it with them. But do I ever shove it down somebody's throat? Absolutely not. I refuse to. Like, I hope people understand that. It's like the really hardcore dudes that are like, man, if you're not getting up and working out every morning and doing this, then you're wrong. And it's like, okay, I hear you. I don't disagree with you. It's great to have a schedule and do those things, but, like, should you shove that down somebody's throat when they're struggling with their mental health and their physical health and stuff like that? No, you have to approach it in a way where it works for that person if you want to snap them out of that funk. And
Exactly.
that's why I don't know. Human nature is just fascinating.
And how everyone has their different nuances and stuff. Like, not everybody's going to operate the same. Like, that's great that you can get up at 4:30 every morning and push it hard and do 2 hours of work at the gym and this and that. Me, I can't. I get up at 5:30 every day. And I have since I've implemented a workout routine, but in a different way. At one point, I was doing 2-a-days, and another point, I was doing a CrossFit gym because of the community type of thing. But it's figuring out at different phases in your life too. Like, hey, what's going to work here? What's actually going to work? What's the most important? Now it's like you've got 2 small children in your life, and who's the important side here, and how do you make something work with these other factors in your life? Like, what do you want? Quite honestly, I feel that you can have anything you want in your life, but anything comes with a cost, and you have to figure out what's important to you. And is it worth it to either let something go or to bolster something? And you got to take a hard inventory there of what you want, because you can have anything. But you look at some of the really successful people out there, and you're like, but would you want their personal life? I look at a lot of them, and I'm like, heck no, man. Heck no.
It's
They got nobody. Nobody's on their side.
that adaptability and just really forcing yourself to just be malleable, so that as you work your way through life and you get punched in the face time after time after time, like, you can let that knock you down and then coast through life. And for some people, that's what they want to do. I'm not judging anybody on that. For others, like, if the one thing that just drives me insane is when people look at like some of these millionaires and billionaires and be like, oh man, that must be nice. And it's like, well, I bet it is nice now, but everything they had to work their butts off to get to that point, everything that they've been through up to that point, you tell me if you have the stomach for that. And that's usually a quick way to shut people off when they do that pessimistic, that must be nice. And it's like, oh, do tell how you think it was a nice process to get there. Like,
unless it's inherited, and even then, those people, you have to look at their family life and how they grew up, and you're like, well, dad was never here, or this and that. Like, well, they might have inherited something, or were taught a certain way, or they have that trust fund and they're living that soft life. But what other things are out there with that?
Yeah, it's one thing to inherit it, it's another thing to keep it.
Oh, that's the biggest thing. I mean, even people that grow that wealth end of things, that's one of the hardest ends, because it's how many have you known that have overextended once they're there, and they get caught up in things, and then all of a sudden they're broke? How many athletes or superstars out there do you see that are completely penniless, or doing actors is kind of really some of the stuff you're seeing these days, to where the movie industry is really dried up compared to what it was in the past. There's not millions upon millions for a lot of the stuff out there.
Absolutely.
There's a budget, but it's not what it was. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating how those things change.
Well, it's just it's the way the world goes. It's the way we were talking before. Technology changes everything. You're looking at how AI is changing things, and even, oh my God, I was using this the other day for some research for a new project that I'm working on in the writing end of things, and I'm like, wow, I wish I had this AI crawler before, because the things that it came back with within 5 minutes, hey, do a deep search on the background here. And it's like, it just looked at, 40, 50 plus sites within the matter of 5 minutes, and just like pulled all the pertinent information and showed, hey, this one says this, but this one says this, which source would you like to actually use within here? That's the official end. But then you're getting these, so it's cool, the tools that are out there, but people who over rely on it and take something without doing the legwork, there is a danger there too. So
with the advances, you have to maintain your basic skills. Like, you have to master the basics. And if you rely on these automated things, like my wife's car is on the fritz right now, so we have a loaner from the dealership that is it's like a 2025 Santa Fe. I've never driven anything like that before, and I figured out it has a self-driving cruise button. So one day I hit it and I was like, all right, what's going to happen? And this thing was like driving me down the road and taking turns at 70 miles an hour. I was like, what is this spaceship? But at the same time, my mind went straight to, holy crap, like, if a kid just starting out driving starts with this, are they going to have those basic motor skills of how to drive a vehicle? It's kind of like writers that start out using AI and they've never done like the
Yeah.
absolute grinding nature of researching for writing a book or a story, or the grinding nature of like collecting 5 interviews to get everything you need for a story, then transcribing those either by hand or using one of the automated transcription devices, then going through and pulling quotes that doesn't change what they said, but
Yeah.
it works in the story for the flow and stuff. Like, if you start out with these automated functions, do make sure you know how to do the basics if for some reason that stuff fails.
That was when I was racing cars, the same thing. It was like you start off, and I mean, military, same exact thing. What is it? Crawl, walk, run.
Yep.
You know, it's the same deal, but have your foundation built out. That was one of the best things. I was like bitching about it at one point to the instructor. I'm like, why are we using this piece of crap car, you know, around this track? Like, why don't we take the other one out there that's there? And he's like, well, because this one has no driving aids. Like, you'll see when you get there, you know. And yes, the other car was easier, but either thrown into a flat spin situation or X, Y, or Z. And you're like, oh, okay. So if I can make the slow car fast, I can make the fast car ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah, that's the crawl, walk, run. Like, I'm sure some vets out there will be like, "Ugh, God, like I'm tired of hearing that," but it's true. It's true. If you follow that process when you're learning anything, you're better off at the end. Whereas if you start at that running pace, some people can do that, but do you
Yeah.
have those basic motor functions established? Whether it's shooting a gun, whether it's calling in an airstrike, whether it's communicating with when your comms go down, like using the mirrors, using hand signals, stuff like that. Like, if you don't have those things, especially in
Mhm.
today's like battlefield, I'm working on a project right now for a video on what the golden hour is going to look like in today's battlefield. And
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating to think like, man, that might not be a thing like it was in the GWAT. Like, you might have to be doing prolonged care in the battlefield while under fire for days or months or even years. And like, that's a wild concept. And it's been cool to be able to see how that transformed over the years, just covering like the multinational exercises like Saber Junction in Germany. That was crazy to
Yeah.
see what they were doing. And even back then, they're like, the drone conversation was kind of kicking up, and these different tactics to adapt to this new technology, like electronic warfare and jamming stuff. And it's pretty wild. And I'm curious to see how we adapt to today's battlefield. And it's the same thing. And like, I don't know, I could go down a rabbit hole on this again, but it's paramedics, healthcare, the military, like racing. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Like, the technology age that we're in right now is just insane. There's new things coming out every day. AI is getting better every day. You have self-driving, self-flying things. Like, we got to figure out how to use it. But I might be outdated with my mindset, but I look at things as tools.
Mhm.
Know how to use it, but don't
Yeah.
rely on it. You have to have a backup for the tool that you're using. And if you don't, like, you get into that shit situation, like dead in the water.
Not wrong at all. So what's next on the list for you on the slate? I know we talked a little bit about like where you're headed with things, because I know recently the staff writer job changed and you're headed in another direction now.
Yeah, I was laid off from Task and Purpose recently, and so what I did was I just jumped straight into launching my own company to kind of consolidate what I've been honing my skill set on over the last several years. It's called On Assignment Media, so I'm going full steam with that. I'm still working shifts as a paramedic because that's just something I can't give up. But my main focus is building up my company. It's just me, and doing my storytelling stuff, whether it's through photo, video, writing, social media, um, all those things. I'm just going to present and work my tail off until I can get to a place where I'm pretty comfortable in life, but always pursuing those next challenges. I have a lot of mountains I want to climb, a lot of kayaking trips I want to do. and it's just one step after the next. But I'm pretty excited for what's coming up. Just doing, I have some contracts lined up with different companies where I'm either doing film stuff or I'm doing photography or doing writing. I'm still freelance, um, or freelancing as a journalist. So I've gotten a few stories kicked over to other publications now. That should be going publishing any day, and so I'm just full steam ahead instead of searching for the, I don't know. I'm not trying to go back to full-time paramedicine or anything like that. I would really want to stay in on this storyteller pathway, and I have a couple books in the works. One of them's a fiction book that I'm working on that's action kind of plot line, and I'm pretty excited to get that done. I have a little bit more time on my hands since I'm not in that grinding news cycle right now. So I got a lot of pans on the fryer, so to speak.
There's two ways you could go with this, right? You could sit back on there and be like, "Oh my god, I was let go, and what am I going to do? I don't know, maybe go for the stability." And instead you're going, "Okay, I want to be a storyteller. What do I have to do to make that happen?" Yeah, starting out with Black Rifle magazine in the earlier days there, I mean, I know that they pulled a lot of people that could do it all kind of end of things. So you have the photography side, you have the journalist side where you're writing, you have that end, you have connections in the space. I mean, but you're leaning into it. You're like, instead of cowering away, or you're going right back into it, which is awesome. That's cool to see. And then from here, you never know. The possibilities are endless out there, quite honestly, with everything that's going on out there and everything that you're aware of in that side. It's an exciting time to be alive, I would say,
Very
honestly.
much so. Comfort is
Yeah.
a very dangerous thing, and I I don't know. I've had uh, I've lived a very hard life up to this point, and every time I decide like I want to be comfortable, I want to just do this 9 to 5 job. I'm okay with just slowing down for a little bit. It drives me insane, and then I go right back into some sort of chaos. So with kind of learning my lessons over the years with this recent layoff, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sit back and go for a stable job. Like I'm just leaning into it full force. And I've had a lot of really great mentors that I've talked to about my business, leading up to this. And one of the things I asked was like, is it weird that I'm freaking terrified to do this? And they're like, no, it's 100% normal. Like if you
Yeah.
weren't terrified, there's something wrong with you or you're doing it wrong. And I was like, okay. So I'm just leaning into it full bore, and I love everything that I've been doing, and different companies I've worked for over the past, and nonprofits and stuff. And I've just found like that's when I feel like I'm at my best, and it would be silly for me not to like go into this head first.
Yeah. Lean into it. You said that's on Assignment Media, and I know I'm going to put this in the description links on everything, and I'll do the whole tag and end of things that we do with social media and whatnot, and send people to the correct websites.
Yeah, it's on Assignment Media, and with the very abrupt nature of everything, I'm still building my website, so that's in
Okay.
the works. I right now I'm pointing people straight to my email address if they want to reach out or anything. Otherwise, my Instagram is like my main hit point right now, and once I have my logo finished, I'll launch my website. I still have my old company website, Skovlund Media, but I'm retiring that. I'm just making sure I need to get the new URL locked down. For some reason, on assignmentmedia.com is picked up by somebody, even though there's no businesses I could find with that name. So that's fun, but
There's always, I mean, and that's part of the struggle too. Finding either that open URL or finding out, hey, like what do I have to buy this for?
yep.
There's one of them out there with the same I think it was the Instagram handle, where I had somebody contact me and they were like, "Hey man, I'm looking for you on here, and there's this weird freaking Instagram with all this sex stuff on here." And I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, dude, seriously?" I'm like, "All right, man, just add book to the end of that."
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Oh man.
I
Yeah.
didn't foresee that one.
Those are like those weird like hurdles you have to go over, and I've learned my lessons because I started Skovlund Photography right before the pandemic kicked off. That got crushed immediately because all the different weddings I had booked and stuff just canceled, let go, paid them back. And I was like, okay, that didn't work. A couple years later, I started Skovlund Media when I was really leaning into like gear review, freelancing and stuff. That went decent, but with still being a full-time journalist, it was hard to balance both of them. And now with this recent layoff, I'm taking all the lessons learned and I'm putting everything into this new endeavor. So it's things are moving, but it's not easy to run your own business or get it off the ground. And I'm very open to the challenge, but it's a learning process as it unfolds.
I was going to say, Josh, if you need to speak to anybody specifically or need some advice from a subject matter expert or something too in that side of things, let me know, man. I've actually been meeting a few people through the show. I know a few things, very basic. I'm not going to toot my own horn on that end, but like I have met a bunch of people through the show, and that's actually been one of the things that I've been trying to do with the other guests out there is like, hey, if you see someone on here that can help out in any way, like let me know, because I have this contact information. I'm building this, Rolodex, if you will.
Yeah.
And finding these different contacts out there to be like, hey, you know what, this guy's over here doing this. You guys would be I just made one the other day. You guys would be a great connection. And more times than not, it turns out awesome.
Oh, absolutely. That's one thing I've learned over the years is networking is key to anything in this space. And just throughout the last like 6-7 years, like that networking has just grown and grown and grown to the point where I was able to get stories published that nobody else could. And that's like a great place to be as a journalist. But now I'm branching into this business where I need to expand that networking outside of the journalism purpose and really start to build it. And I still have some great people I've worked with over the years, just through when I was at Black Rifle, when I've been at Task and Purpose, the different nonprofits and stuff like that. But I'm always down. If somebody is looking to get into journalism or figure out how to run a camera or anything like that, I'm always happy to help people. And if anybody sees a flaw in what I'm talking about, I am a very humble man. So I'm always open to like, hey, have you thought about doing this? So always down to talk.
I can't really, I was like, how are we going to end this? But it just, that's a really good segue right there. And that's part of what this show is about is talking to other people and spreading that knowledge, making those connections, building those relationships. But a lot of times people hear this end of things, or they hear something from somebody who is within a space, and something just clicks within their own, and they're like, oh man, I never really thought about it that way, or something about that really interests me. And sometimes when you pull a thread like that, you never know where it's going to end up.
Oh, absolutely. It's it's always great chatting with you. And I hope the conversation can help anybody else out there that maybe didn't think of it in that way, or especially on the journalism stuff. I still have unlimited passion for that. It's something I want to continue to do in a freelance capacity, but I want like the general public to understand like all the problems aren't solely on the journalist. All the problems, it's a shared problem. Let's figure out how we meet in the middle on this stuff. And then that way you're getting the information that you need, but also the entertainment. I love writing a piece that somebody's just like, heck yeah, that was a great story. So I think as long as people are open-minded with that, it's a way to get past like this very malicious journalists are failing or they're biased and like just these heavy accusations. I think it needs to be looked at from a whole perspective and understand how we all move forward in this space.
Yeah. Josh, hang tight real quick. I want to talk to you afterwards, but no, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in again to Veteran Success Story. This has been it's been a great conversation with Josh, and I'm going to leave everything in order for you guys to track him down, whether it be his new project on assignment media, look at some of his old portfolio, whether it's the work portfolio and whatnot, Skovlund Media, or his new project on assignment media. just look in the description link. I have all that stuff in there. My goal is to provide an outlet for you guys to be able to find this stuff or to be inspired by the work of these other people out there that are out there doing the work. So again, I'm going to ask you one more time at the end of the show, follow and subscribe if this is something that's been useful to you, and tell a friend as well. That's all I ask. Tell one or two if you're like, hey, you know what, this is pertinent to this episode. And if it comes up later on, just you know somebody who's either looking down that journalistic path or something that was talked about in there sort of had a light bulb go off. Keep it in mind and pass along that information to other people. But follow, subscribe. It helps out a lot on this end with me continuing to put these shows out in the way of, being able to bring this content to you for free, no money out of your pocket. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I enjoyed speaking with Josh and a bunch of the other guests that I've had on here. Well, all of the guests, right? Because we don't air the other episodes. You never see them. I don't think I've actually had anybody on here yet that I haven't. There are some in the backlog, that I'm thinking about. But I hope you enjoyed the show. And I'm just rambling on right now. So I look forward to seeing you guys tune in next week. We have another good episode coming up. Matter of fact, the guest is actually tied to this one in a way. So I know you're going to enjoy it. And this has been yet another veteran success story.